I had a dream last night that filled me full of fright. I dreamt that I was with the devil below in his great big fiery hall, where the devil was giving a ball. I checked my coat and hat and started gazing at the merry crowd who came to witness the show, and I must confess to you, there were many there I knew.
Hello. Hi.
At the devil's ball, at the devil's ball, at the devil's ball.
Before we get started today, I want to emphasize that nothing in tonight's episode is intended to be anti-Semitic. We're all about whistling in the dark of the shadow that religion casts, and a part of that darkness is the othering of Jews in the Middle Ages and beyond. Thanks for listening. Welcome to the Dispatchist podcast, a friendly conversation about eternal damnation. I'm Jacob.
Hey, I'm Jamin.
I'm Victoria.
And this week I think we'll be talking about what does the devil look like, which is a little off topic for a top podcast about hell because it's more about the management.
Well, somebody's got to run the place.
That's true. But did anybody bring anything to the party?
Oh, hey, I actually brought some cinnamon and kidney empanadas. I had lots of cinnamon running around. I'm great with dough, and there was a kidney in the refrigerator. I don't know if you were saving that for anybody, but...
No. And food should be a challenge.
Okay, well...
Was it a kidney for a transplant that you were saving?
It was just in a little bag with some little red crosses on the side. I don't know what it meant. There was no expiration date, so I presume it's fresh.
That's fine. I mean, you know, kidneys are a dime a dozen.
Yeah, if it didn't have anybody's name on it, it's leftovers.
Well, I brought some Fireball whiskey because I think that that's a suitable drink for the Party City devil in all of us, or as you called him once, the Hallmark devil with red tights and plastic horns.
I almost could have gone for Arrogant Bastard Ale, which has a really nice demon on the front.
Yes.
Would have been kind of, this week in particular, on topic.
Maybe a little too classy.
No.
I don't know if it...
Have you had Fireball?
Yeah, it's a bottle of regret.
Well, I brought the entertainment, which is being cast into a snow-covered pit with the greedy and being treated like cows under a spark-filled rainstorm as the Virgin Mary watches.
Ooh, she's a perv.
Yeah. Oh no, she is quite the watcher there.
Lurkin' Mary.
Her and Beatrice, I mean, they are just staring. So on Twitter, at the Dispatchist, I've been playing around with the Folklore Thursday community. Every Thursday they put out an ask for the folklore community to just post something relevant to topic. And last week it was, 2 weeks ago, it was the sea and the ocean. So I got to do a little thing on Leviathan.
Ooh.
Who's one of the name brand demons. And last week the topic was actually hell, or the underworld at least.
What?
So I talked about Grill-eye. And do you know this word? This is a new word for us.
I learned it from you.
Okay. So Grill-eye are those weird little homunculi. Wow. The little beings that are all over the place in Hieronymus Bosch pictures. Just weird little distorted hybrid imps. Mm-hmm. They're called Grill-eye, which variously means pig and cricket.
Why are we not using this word every single day?
Because it's got Latin and Greek roots, and we don't know where the double I goes.
Yeah, that's true. It looks like Welsh.
It does look like Welsh.
So this week's Folklore Thursday topic is major monsters from mythology. And I learned that Cerberus has 3 bodies.
What?
Yeah, Euripides says this, which basically means it's 3 dogs, and that's less magical somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, anybody could just get 3 dogs and just some duct tape and, there you go.
A really good collar.
Last time I tried to break into a junkyard, 1 dog was enough to keep me away. If there were 3 pit bulls guarding all the delicious rubble out there, Cerberus can have 3 bodies and a snake for a tail. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, but at some point in time, like 3 bodies, 3 heads, I don't know.
Yeah, that just seems like some kind of, DIY shtick. Some Party City stuff going on right there.
So I suspect this is going to be the GOAT episode. Yeah? No arguments there? Okay.
Nope.
It might be the first of the goat episodes.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, you're right. So let's get started talking about senior management. What does the devil look like? I think any good 20th century evangelical Christian would say we don't know, or anything, or some variation of the question has no meaning, but that's not very much fun. So we said that. Let's move on to more fun.
At the last Halloween party I went with a young lady who wore red horns and a miniskirt.
Okay.
And fishnet tights, and she had a trident, a red sparkly trident.
Okay. The miniskirt's off model.
I didn't object.
Fair.
Can I tell you that describes exactly the devil on one of my tarot cards?
What tarot deck is that?
It is the Halloween deck.
Of course.
Yes.
Fishnets and everything?
Yeah, I'm going to hold... You probably can't see it, but...
No, that makes for really good podcasting. She is cute, though.
Wow.
I'll send it to you later, but it's like an R. Crumb depiction of a hot girl devil wearing a blue kind of bustier / mini dress with fishnets and biker boots and a trident.
We do have the classic trident and horns there, so yeah, let's start there. Why trident? Why horns?
Why red?
Why red? I was looking at an article in Aleteia, aleteia.org, which is kind of like a slightly fluffy Catholic saints and articles blog. It was good. It was a good start. I think it was a little bit maybe under-researched, but we're here to help. And they'd start with the pitchfork, which they kind of floating as an as above, so below thing, because like Zeus had his lightning bolts and Poseidon had his trident, and Pluto, Hades had a duodent, which is like the two-fork version of the trident, but nobody really cared, so it became a trident over time.
That'd be a bident.
Bident, yeah, like the double mint gum sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so they were saying that this is kind of likely the origin of this is just kind of that imagery from Hades carried over, which makes sense. I think I disagreed with them on the goat legs, though, and why red tights. I just think they were really simplistic on this. The red tights thing, they said, well, Disney animation, earliest 20th century advertising copy, and that's shallow. I think it goes way further back than that.
I wonder, does the red have something to do with lust? If you want to convey sin in the simplest way possible for the peasants, color coding is potentially a very good way to go. And the trident, I wonder, I mean, it's for poking, right? It's just, it's like a big barbecue fork. Like if you're going to be roasting souls, you got to have something to turn them with.
But also a scepter.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That sounds sound. The red carries back to medieval morality plays. Again, we'll go there. You can see like images of their devils frolicking around in red, and that would show up from the stage. I think maybe at some point in time, like red and white flipped, because if you go back to looking at like Santa Claus over the years, well, he's a bad example.
Santa Claus is a terrible example.
I know. So
Santa Claus, he's a jerk.
He stayed red. But early on, like red was blood of Christ sort of thing and was a symbol of purity. But I think that it kind of transmorphed into just kind of scary blood color. It is the most alarming color we have. So I don't know. But
it's the color of fire.
Exactly.
In Japanese culture, is white evil?
White is death.
Ah, okay. That's right.
And I don't know if it's Japanese, but in Chinese, red is joy. Wedding dresses are red.
And you have like red envelopes of money.
Yeah. The hongbao.
But one of the first big popular images of Satan was from Goethe's Faust, which was put on stage, and that devil wore red, and he captured the stage. And so that kind of, a lot of the stage notes from there and advertising kind of spins off of that, with the red devil being kind of the look.
Did he wear Prada too?
No, that's that little bit too pop. So that kind of works in the Middle Ages, and then you kind of go through the 19th century, and you see a lot of, in like advertising and things, you see a very classic, handsome-looking Satan wearing clingy red clothing, and that's kind of the 20th century, 19th century pop devil, which that does kind of feed into the Disney look and feel, but it does definitely go way back further than that. Horns and tail, Alita says, is kind of tied to the Book of Revelations, maybe at first, where you have the serpent, and the serpent does have quite a number of horns and a tail, so there's that, but all the animalism imagery, I think we're going to take in a different direction. So
we can have horns. If we're going to agree that there's a lot of goat imagery in this, horns are great. But the the kind of modern devil's tail, where you have a tail and at the end there's like a little reverse heart shape or a reverse diamond. Tail? The spade tail, that's the one. That's not goat-like.
No, it's a little more scorpion-y, or maybe like heraldic wyvern style. That might be it. It might be a dragon tail.
I went to Reddit thinking maybe an answer there.
The source of all information.
It's that they're connecting it to a trident. Succubi. Well, it's connected. It's also in depictions of succubi.
Okay.
But why?
I don't know.
That's interesting.
Quorum says, well, it's phallic.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I can buy that kind of. But the horns. Let's talk about the horns.
I don't know. Like the goat thing, is it again because, well, there's a sort of agrarian pagan thing going on. And also goats are also associated with kind of unrestrained sexuality or id, especially if you think about stories about witches and having sex with goats, and goats just don't seem to have a whole lot of boundaries, let's say.
Yeah, I think the goat in the 14th century witchcraft scare, that definitely kind of feeds into it as like a symbol of caprine lust. Absolutely. And the
capricious.
Yeah. The devil appearing as a goat, that totally makes sense. Yes, absolutely. Goats are kind of trampy. Yeah.
Black Phillip, live life deliciously.
I think there's a reference here I don't have.
Oh, it's from the movie The Witch.
Okay. Oh, is that the one in Esperanto? No, the really weird recent one.
It's a couple of years ago. It's really good.
That's creepy. It's
taken from actual witch trial transcripts.
Interesting.
There's a witch movie in Esperanto?
No, that was that weird Mel Gibson one. That was in Aramaic.
No, thank you.
Oh, there's one in Esperanto too?
Shatner
did one.
And the Incubus.
What?
Yes. That Shatner, Esperanto, Incubus. Yes. Let's not go down this road anymore.
Let me just say, Shatner in Esperanto is Shatner at his finest.
You just made my weekend.
Can't argue with that. But goat horns. Let's go to the horns first. We might be able to take those all the way back to Moses in the Old Testament. King James Bible, Moses was described as having beams of light from his head. But in the Vulgate, which I guess that was the Latin Bible, there was a funny mistranslation and he had horns instead. And that kind of stuck. Michelangelo showed him with horns and that kind of took off as an image, Moses with horns.
Is that where the depictions of Jews having horns came from because of Moses and that mistranslation?
So maybe, but it caught on in other ways too. Like in Vienna, 1267, I don't know, when was Michelangelo? He's later than that, wasn't he? He's like Renaissance.
He was working on the sculpture between 1513 and 1515 and went with horns.
Okay.
I'm looking at pictures of Moses, like this statue of Moses with horns, and those are legitimately, they're not horns, they're cat ears. If you Google Michelangelo's Moses with horns, the first 27 pages are Neko Moses with cute little cat ears. Like, I don't know if these are goat horns.
In the late Middle Ages, like 1250 or so, the Vienna Council says that Jews have to go in public with a horned hat to mark them. And this is definitely not the beginning of anti-Semitism as a cultural thing in the Middle Ages, but it's one of the more blatant ones. The horn hat kind of takes the image of like two little wimples or actual horns, or they have to wear like horns on a lapel label sort of thing, like a badge. In the Middle Ages, there was a very strong association with Jews who just ended up holding on to the dark side of society, like its rage and anger for a very long time. And goats, maybe because going back to like Matthew, Jesus talks about separating the goats from the sheep, and the Christian faithful become the sheep. So everybody else is the goats or something. And this goat label sticks. And then also a lot of Jewish ritual had goats in it as sacrificial animals, as a really great food source.
The scapegoat.
Yeah. Oh, the scapegoat. I do want to go there. I have like a long-winded aside on the scapegoat. But the association of Jews and goats it's very strong in like the Middle Ages, the 1100s, 1200s, 1300s. You see images of Jews riding goats on our architecture and such. But there's also just kind of this tie of the image of the Jew in the Middle Ages and the devil. And they don't disassociate well. Judaism is kind of the like it becomes the cultural opposite of Christianity. And they're very other, so strongly other. It does not end until this century. That maybe it didn't end this century either. I was reading like an anti-Semitism fact sheet that describes how Jews were associated with goats and pigs and cows, and it's still kind of in the language now. Mm-hmm. Tails. The devil has a tail. Jews were said to have tails. They hid them under their cloaks very cleverly, but that was another thing.
Mm-hmm.
I never actually knew that. I don't think anybody ever told me in 5th grade, when all proper knowledge is disseminated, that Jews had tails.
That one might not have jumped the ocean so well.
Oh.
I don't know. But a lot of other kind of devilish imagery was heaped on them. Like there's this concept of the odor of sanctity that you get. That's like when you open up a saint's crypt, it smells like roses and not decay. Good things smelled X. And so Jews, without any real fact, were said to smell bad. The image of the Jew becomes kind of crushed up against the image of the devil in the Middle Ages, and it doesn't separate. I mean, people would have pictures of the Jew devil, and these were common links.
So goat horns, and this is something like, yes, witches and goats, the black goat, satyrs, fawns, all these evil things with goats, but for the devil, and I'm looking at a picture of Victoria right now, she has horns on.
Yes, very nice.
Right. But
these are my natural horns, by the way.
No, absolutely.
No
I can
filter.
tell. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know how to describe it. The horns she has on are kind of pointy and going up, whereas goat horns are pointy, but they go back. Like they're designed for ramming, right? I would look at Victoria and I would immediately say, these horns are devil horns, not goat horns. So
well, they're kind of cartoony, but they are little pointy horns.
But even baby goats, like their little tiny baby goat horns, they're still so cute. Yeah, they're freaking adorable as they try and ram your little kneecaps. But like, are devil horns? Let me rephrase this. When I say the devil, I mean specifically the little red devil with the pitchfork and the cute little tail and the miniskirt. Those aren't goat horns.
So the devil goes in phases. John and I picked up a book on, it was called Damned, A History of the Devil in Illustration, or something along those lines. And it was just across 400 years or so what the devil looks like, running up to the modern ages in cinema and things like that. And early on, the devil is just kind of very animalistic and bestial looking. He's a hairy person with animal traits, a beak, a weird head, strange clawed feet, a mouth on his groin. I mean, in his groin. His groin is a mouth. His butt is a mouth. I don't know. These were alien ideas. By the way, never Google the phrase devil's anal mouth. It goes nowhere good. But that kind of played on the fear of sexuality that was very Christian at the time. But he becomes classier and classier. Like through the 1600s, he becomes kind of a romantic figure. And then in the 19th, 20th century, he becomes like the marketing scheme devil. And I think that maybe the real out there horns just weren't classy enough. So like if you wanted to be on a cigar box, you needed better horns. That's a thought. Thought.
Here's a question, and this is just pure theory, but do these kind of Party City horns, are they more similar to the horns on Moses than an actual goat?
Well, we should see what the Party City Moses costume looks like.
Sexy Moses?
Oh, gosh. I never even thought of it. That'd be great. Let's Google for that later and see what we get.
Should we finish rounding out the devil with hooves? Or should we move on?
I just don't see that hooves are that different from goats.
But there is the later innovation of the dapper devil who is wearing human clothing and has like one human foot and a hoof I guess not because he doesn't have 3 feet, a hoof and a chicken foot.
Yeah, I've seen things like that. That feels like it borrowed from the Rakshasa almost.
Yeah. That's a good.
Because they always had like mismatched hands and things like that.
They're backwards, right?
Yeah, things like that. But yeah, the devil and his mismatched feet, is that just to be alien, to be different and perverse, maybe? A sign of his corruption? I don't know. Aletheia says, and I think not entirely accurately, that the devil is associated with goat hooves and goat legs because of Pan. And Pan is also a faun. He also has those legs. And maybe that goes into his, like specifically those little cloven hooves. Maybe? I don't know. But kind of quick Googling it, I think people kind of assert that that's a recent collision of ideas, that the devil as Pan is a response to the late 19th century Victorian pastoral, where Pan got this major revival thing happening. Like if you read The Wind in the Willows towards the end, there's a scene where all the animals go and they encounter like the god Pan in the woods. That's kind of the dying embers of this. But there was a big back to nature revival in the Victorian era, at least in terms of like art and poetry and things like that. It was kind of twee. Pan became very popular then, and that might be where the Pan as devil association kind of came into its full, because like a Christian reaction to that or a popular culture reaction to that, I don't know. But I think looking back at the art from that history of Satan illustration book, yeah, you don't see a lot of like specifically goat-legged Satans at all. They're bestial, but they're not goat-legged for a very long time, or they're not goat-legged at all, really.
Interesting.
So that might be like 1800s and after that's a thing. There's probably odd ones outward. Is the thing?
Can I say something about chicken feet?
Sure.
So it turns out that's potentially a regional affectation. It seems like it's a Southwestern thing or Mexican folklore thing. In fact, on Folklore Thursday, there's a story about the man with chicken feet who is seducing young girls at a dance, and he ends up stealing one particular young lady's soul, and everybody remarks like at the fact that this gentleman had chicken feet. So I'm not sure why.
If that's what it takes to be popular at dances, I'm buying some chicken shoes.
I mean, you do see devils with claw feet. That is a frequent thing. I mean, those are really creepy looking and strange, and it marks them as animalistic. Yes, absolutely.
Moving forward,
we're going to talk about the scapegoat.
The scapegoat, yes.
Scapegoat. So, yes, the scapegoat. The scapegoat was a Yom Kippur tradition where a community would sacrifice a goat to atone for their sins, and that become like eventually. I'm not sure about this, but initially the goat was sacrificed, but there were times where, and I think this became the norm later, where the goat would actually escape. Ergo, the scapegoat.
Right.
But the goat there were often two goats. Yes. There would be the one for the Lord and then one for, is it Azazel?
Something like that. Azazel?
Azazel.
I'm not sure.
So, which is described, at least in this source, as the name of a rocky headland off which one goat having the sins of the community symbolically placed upon it would be thrown. And then the other one would be slaughtered as part of the regular Yom Kippur rituals. But so that would bring atonement to the community. That's where the term scapegoat comes from. Azazel
is fascinating. And he's just neat. He's the head of the goat demons in some versions. There's a mountain, Mount Azazel, that is named after him or co-named with him. I don't know. It sounds like maybe Jewish commentators later on described Azazel as the wilderness, as like a place name for the wilds. But you can roll him back a very long time. The ritual that you describe they talk about it in Leviticus. And in that scenario, two goats, you'd cast dice over them, and one would be sacrificed to Yahweh, and the other would be laden with the sins of the people and sent out into the woods or the wilderness, or thrown off of the cliff of Mount Azazel. One of the three. So Azazel has this kind of feeling of like maybe that's the remnant of some dualistic ritual, because the two go two ways, and they're both sort of sacrificed. One is sacrificed to God, and the other is driven out of the community, the scapegoat. If you roll back Azazel a few hundred years, going to the Canaanites, you see a place where the god El, and Israel is the people of the god of El. El had a number of children, kids, sub-gods, I don't know, like a dozen or so. One of them was Yahweh. One of them was Azaz. The people of Judea were assigned to Yahweh as his tribe. Now the Jewish faith kind of became this is a originally kind of polytheistic. Polytheism fades into monolatry, which is celebrating one god over the rest of the gods in a pantheon as like your favorite god. That's kind of where they were. And then it rolls into monotheism down the road, a long time down the road. But for a while, there's this kind of odd place where there's God, there's multiple gods, but God is just the best God. And that's kind of where Yahweh sits in relation with the Jewish people. So Azazel is sometimes described as one of the Grigori, and these are the Watchers. These are the angel demons that kind of fell because they let themselves be corrupted by humanity and like slept with the ladies and taught humanity bad things, kind of that Prometheus myth, but also very tied to the story of the Garden of Eden, where the serpent gives wisdom to Eve, sort of, kind of. In the Apocalypse of Abraham, the serpent's name is Azazel. And it describes him, which this is talking about what does the devil look like. The serpent in the garden is described as, let's see, where is it? A dragon with hands and feet like a man, on his back 6 wings on the right and 6 on the left. So hands and feet like a man, lots of wings. That's the dragon of the Garden of Eden. And it's likely Azazel. So I think that Azazel being kind of this, for a while in a dualistic relationship with Yahweh, like he becomes the demon of the wilderness and Yahweh is the God of the people. This is a very kind of binary pair. And that fades over time as we get rid of binaries and dualism and go to pure monotheism. But since Azazel is associated with goats, he's the head of the goat demons, I think this is a place where maybe that didn't give the devil his goat legs, but they were probably really comfortable when he found them in the 18th century. I kind of put this together in my head. It may not be valid, but in Matthew 4:1, there's the scene where Jesus goes into the wilderness and he meets the devil. He's considered the ultimate scapegoat and the last scapegoat, being sent into the wilderness and talking with quite possibly Azazel. So from now on, I'm going to think of that as the story of Jesus going to talk to his crazy trailer park uncle. Anyway, Azazel, long aside there.
I love it. I love the idea of a scapegoat because it feeds into my theory that a lot of religion is just sort of outsourcing responsibility.
That's kind of what this is, because if you have 2 goats and one goat gets sacrificed, the other goat, in some stories, the goat is thrown off a cliff, and other, it's just released into the wilderness. It's like, okay, goat, fend for yourself in these delicious rocky twigs and trees and goat haven, right? So it's like, okay, you, the goat, who bears the entirety of the sins of Israel, are free. Okay, bye. Bye. Go that way. Don't come back. You can't be part of the herd anymore. You have to be out there, right? So all you have to do to gain freedom is just bear the sins of everybody else. Mm-hmm. And you're a goat, so who cares?
That sounds a lot like Jesus. Oh, wow.
Let's see, Gimpy Satan.
Right. Well, if he has a chicken foot.
Well, so I think Gimpy Satan, I think it's a big 1200 to 1400 thing. The big Gimpy Satan is the one in the Inferno, where Satan has plunged from the top of the heavens all the way into the center of the earth, and he's just crippled. He's like embedded in the icy lake of Cocytus, I think. And he's this brainless monstrosity that just spends all of his time endlessly chewing on Cassius, Brutus, and Judas forever. Like, that's what he does. He's mindless. He has no agency. He just kind of vaguely waves his wings and endlessly chews on these sinners. And actually, Dante and Virgil have to climb over his like hairy legs to get to the next place they're going to visit, which is purgatory. So he's just useless and broken. And I think there's a tradition there in the Middle Ages of useless and broken Satan. Maybe because they didn't need dualism at all, because they had Christ triumphant, and having an active, scary Satan was not something that was desirable.
That makes sense. It's been written, Satan loses, the devil loses, ultimately he wins. Why bother showing him having any power at all. We already know he lost.
Right.
So why bother?
So the Satan room becomes like a major tourist destination when you're on your personal tour of hell. Tundle, I love Tundle, goes to visit the Satan room, and he sees that Satan is this vast black creature, 150 feet long, with 1,000 arms, each one of which with 20 fingered hands with 60-foot long swords on their nails, etc., etc. And his Satan is tied to a grill and being roasted forever by demons. Not an unenviable place to be. Hildegard of Bingen says that she saw Satan as being a black worm covered in bristles with 5 bodies, 1 head. I think that's right. I'm not sure. His skull was crushed and dislocated, and he was chained and wounded, so he couldn't move around. The nun, St. Francis of Rome, says that she saw Satan, a huge Satan that was so big that he sprawled across like 3 levels of hell. And he was crowned with like a deer horn tiara sort of thing with horns on his horns. But he was chained to hell itself, except for like his tail or leg that was also chained to a giant dragon, which again doesn't sound fun. And there's others of these things, these broken Satans. This was an image. So Gimpy Devil.
Yeah, in Dante, he's frozen in the lake, like up to his waist. He's frozen in the lake. He can't move. He can only chew on Judas, Brutus, and Cassius, who are the big assassins in Rome.
Well, it's traitors. That's what the bottom level.
And the difference is Judas is chewed on head first, while everyone else is chewed on feet first, to showing the level of traitorism. So,
well, yeah, of course, that makes perfect sense. One thing I like about this particular story and this particular Satan is that it's picked up in Dungeons and Dragons later on, because Asmodeus is actually a puppet or like a mask for the real devil, who is a broken coatl, like a feathered serpent, hiding in the basement of Avernus. He used to be a real coatl, and like his twin was Jezeriel, and they created the world, but he rebelled and got flung down and broke into the bottom level of hell and is like broken and trying to mend his forces there. So that's kind of directly stolen from Dante.
Wow. I didn't know that.
It's really obscure. I didn't even know that either.
So how do we get to the sexy devil?
Party City.
Well, I'm going to say Milton on that probably, because like 1400s, when we get to the Renaissance, we get the stage presentation of the devil. Faust, very influential. We just said that. And then Milton's sexy devil comes up, and that's the rebellious devil. I feel like devils get a lot more human after that for a time. Maybe that's just the quality of the woodcutting that's involved. I don't know. But there's a vogue for romantic devils, and that seems to carry a very long time, possibly to the current era where we have a stronger sort of dualistic devil versus God sort of relationship going on now. But I don't know where the advent of the sexy devil specifically came from. I'm guessing it came from the stage and from Milton.
One aspect, Lucifer was the shining light, the most beautiful of beautiful whatchamacallits. And while we may not specifically say, devil equals sexy, he starts out from the beginning as one of the most beautiful creatures, a shining light, etc.
Yeah.
Whether that changed in the fall, who knows? But in the beginning, he was beautiful. Whether beauty is the same as sexy, I'll pass on that one.
Well, I think canonically, like that's a safer devil than the weird monstrous ones. I think the only really strong description of the devil in the Bible is just the enemy comes as a roaring lion. He doesn't really have a form. I mean, there's the serpent, but that's a different creature. The Antichrist, he's a charmer. So I don't know. In the apocalypses, you get some very weird creatures. Those weren't necessarily the devil. They were maybe a devil, a monster, but the Satan, adversary, what we think of as the devil now, that really wasn't a thing in like 380 so much.
Yeah. I like the connection to Lucifer, Morning Star, as heading towards the sexy devil. Are y'all Sandman fans? The comic book Sandman?
Oh, that is a really good devil. Yeah.
Yes.
He's a good devil. His Azazel is interesting too. It's just kind of all mouths, no goat. Oh, but there is a goat connection there. It's a weird one. So I do like that devil. That in my head, that is Lucifer the Light Bearer, the Sandman devil. if you read The Dreaming, which is the spin-off comic that's currently being published, there is a dive into like the major demon arcana where we meet a lot of the Lords of Hell. Maybe we'll talk about hell hierarchies later on. And it's just kind of this rhyming list of demons. But one of them is Lawrence, and they call him Larry. And he's got weird horns and things like that. And they make fun of him and say he stinks. But that demon goes back to at least the 1800s, where it occurs in de Plancy's Dictionary Infernal as Lawrence. And Lawrence has goat horns. He's a goaty demon. So you can find kind of some associations between him and Azazel if you go back into Google far enough. I don't know about actual mythology, but Lawrence is a horned goaty demon that goes back a while. He looks really weird. He's like Hell's pimp, kind of. He's the keeper of the orgies and the sabbats, which may tie him to the goat devil of the witches' sabbat sort of thing. Sabbat? Sabbat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, Lawrence.
I have to catch up with The Dreaming. I haven't read that yet. Oh.
It goes in circles. So the question of what does the devil look like, I think it emphasizes that there is the devil. And if you go through the Middle Ages and the art there, you see lots of demons. This concept of like diablerie, of just like these crowds of demons that kind of flood out of the hellmouth and dance all over the stage. There's lots of demons. The devil, though, getting an identity, he kind of has to escape from a lot of baggage to kind of become his own person in I guess, the 1100s-ish.
If you just Google the devil, it starts out, who are the seven devils? And it lists them: Lucifer, Mammon, Asmodeus, Leviathan, Beelzebub, Satan, and Belphegor. And each of these is tied to one of the seven deadly sins: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. So do we want to go down this path of, are there seven devils or is there one devil?
Well, so the demonic hierarchies are kind of like academic games in a way. Like, there's not really a canonical list of collective plurals, like a flock of geese or a murder of crows. That's something that people with too much lead ink on their hands would do as for fun. And I think the hierarchies of hell kind of fits into that. The names are pulled from grimoires and things like that, but it seems like there's just a lot of academic fiddling to kind of to build out these lists and such. And maybe the reality, if that's even a word, it seems like it's a layer of sauce poured over something older by a more recent cook.
Inserting a note from the future, what I really wanted to say here is that, as we kind of looked at in this episode, devils tend to evolve organically, and this concept of the seven deadly sins devils is really like after the fact pasting over something that's already there. It just didn't quite feel right to me, but it's still worth the discussion. Beep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And that is fair. I mean, if we had to describe seven deadly sins and then do all this, but then in this list we've got Lucifer, Beelzebub, and Satan, and then some other lesser knowns. So who is the devil? Is it Lucifer or is it Satan?
Yeah, is the devil a thing? It was a devil. And I mean, Azazel is Satan in certain versions. Satan is just the adversary in other stories, and he's an angel of God until like late in the Old Testament. The serpent is its own entity. And then the other ones on that list, some of them were just like deposed pantheons from other Canaanite legends. Baal was another member of the Canaanite pantheon. Sometimes the big beasts make that list, like Bahamut is on that list. Baphomet. Leviathan, they make the cut as major devils, and other times those are just brute forces. It really depends on who built the list, which is why I don't know if there's a canon list of seven deadly sins devils or not. But like these big epic Dukes of Hell, yeah, there's a set of those. It's not a very big set.
Can I ask a question that I've been pondering for centuries, or at least decades, are the seven dwarves aligned with the seven deadly sins?
Let me Google that answer for you real quick.
Sloth, sleepy.
Mm-hmm.
Grumpy is wrath.
Mm-hmm.
Happy is, that one throws me though. It's hard to connect happy to a deadly sin.
Could it be lust?
Well, with that nose.
Yeah. I mean, okay. I don't know. I've been puzzling this one because I feel like that's a great group Halloween costume sometime.
Okay.
The seven deadly dwarves.
Okay. Straight from Reddit. Sleepy as
So
sloth.
you know it's true.
Yeah, it's sleepy as sloth. Grumpy as wrath. Dark as pride. Happy as lust, because I'm happiest when I'm lustful. Bashful as gluttony.
What?
Sneezy as envy. And dopey as greed.
I think there's no.
It doesn't scan.
Yeah, because Dopey is innocent.
It's got
he's
7
very sweet.
upvotes. I mean,
Well then.
The 7 deadly upvotes.
But for now, I think that's all we have time for on this topic. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in hell.
Bye.
I'll be wearing a miniskirt.
I'll have chicken legs.
So. This podcast is copyright 2020 by The Dispatchist and is Creative Commons. You're welcome to reuse with attribution. Look for us on your favorite podcast app. Say hi to us on Twitter or Gmail at The Dispatchist, no spaces. Check out our website, dispatch.ist, for more episodes, show notes, and a variety of hellish resources.